Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. We are so excited to be with you, and we're going to talk about in this video the basic understanding of the relationship between the bass guitar player and the drummer, and really how a worship leader can talk to them during a rehearsal or even on a Sunday morning in service, and giving us some good tips and pointers on how you can get better at coaching your band. And starting right here with the foundation. So I just want to introduce you to these guys really quick. This is Cedric Choi. He plays drums here at Kingsland. And this is Craig Edgar. He plays bass for us. And they both play in many of our services and do a great job. They are fantastic musicians, but they also have a desire and a passion to use their gifts to glorify God in the church and beyond. So I just want to ask you guys really quickly, what are some of the ways that you guys have come to where you are right now? So Cedric, how long have you been playing drums, and really where did you pick up on training for drums?
I've been playing for about 12 years now, I think, and it started out just watching YouTube videos, playing Rock Band a lot, and then I think from there, when I joined youth band growing up at my old church, is where I got a lot of formal training from other musicians that were a lot older that poured into me and helped me out a lot. So yeah, it's kind of my background.
Awesome. And Craig, tell us about your journey.
I've been playing for about 16, 17 years now. Started in middle school, doing my church band as well. And I have always kind of been a band geek kid, and I ended up going to school for music. And this has just always been something that I've been keeping up with.
That's awesome, man. These guys, incredibly musicians, and obviously they started a lot where probably most of you are starting. And that's here in the church setting and youth bands and learning how to play. Great things can happen as you continue down this journey. So we want to talk about just some of the real basics involved with connecting the bass and the drums and really communicating with them. And so the most important thing that can happen for a bass player and a drummer is to lock in the groove of the song. Now, there's several grooves that you can lock into, but some of the basic grooves, especially found in worship music, are the rock groove. Then you're going to hear a little bit about the 4 on the floor beat, and then also the 6/8 groove. And those are the three we're going to focus on today for this first part. So a rock beat, Cedric's going to show us what that is, but you're going to hear it a lot. Boom, ka, boom, boom, ka, boom. You've heard that in a lot of songs. Very familiar sounds. And as he does that, one of the key relationships is that the bass player, his playing connects with the kick drum. So whenever the kick player is playing a beat or a kick, then the bass player is playing that exact same rhythm. And that's the very basic foundation. So I just want to show you, here's a rock groove on a progression, one of the classic worship progressions, 6-4-1-5. Okay? And then we're going to connect these dots together. I'm going to give you a little example real quick. Awesome. So did you hear the relationship and how in sync that was? Just the groove was locked in. And so now I'll show you the next one. This is a 4 on the floor. Now if you play any kind of worship music, these guys know 4 on the floor is so important. Some of you may not even know what that means. But it's basically this little beat right here. Give us a 4 on the floor just to show them that. Yep. It's quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so as that's going on, bass player in the very basic version of this, he's going to play the same quarter notes as the kick drum. All right, let's do a little 4 on the floor. It doesn't just have to be the kick. You can have the snare and the hi-hat too. But now just to talk a little bit, I want to do a slight variation of that. So you notice that Craig, he was playing almost like a staccato bass note with that groove, and that creates a certain energy. But here's a different kind of energy with the 4 on the floor. I want him to play more legato now and connecting the notes with the 4 on the floor. Awesome. So you saw how that it changed the feel, but both of them were a nice locked-in groove and something that we can really build on top of with the rest of the instruments in the band. And these guys know that. They know the relationship, that they are setting a huge foundation for the band to play on top of. And so being very basic, although not always fun, right, is really important. And you can actually do a lot of good for your team by not trying anything too fancy, especially when you're beginning and starting to learn these things. All right, last groove on that same beat pattern with the 4 on the floor. Craig could add a little bit more energy by subdividing the beat to an 8th note groove. So watch this. So you see how that created even just a little bit different experience. And so you might even vary that up. In a moment we're going to talk about how to create energy. But say on the verse of a song, your bass player might be playing quarter notes with this 4 on the floor groove. But when you get to the chorus, he might jump to 8th notes, and that adds the energy to that part of the song and changes up the dynamics. All right, the next groove is the 6/8 groove. Now we're going to go back a little bit to connecting the bass player's exact notes with the kick drum on this groove. Let's play a new progression. How about 4, 1, 6, 5? Watch out, changing the world. All right, and let's try it on that 6/8 groove. Here we go. Awesome. So as you can tell, we didn't really practice that one a whole lot. And so there was a little bit of figuring out, is he doing 1 kick or 2 kicks between the patterns? But what you want to do is, as you're practicing and learning those things, that's how you sync up. You say, okay, what are you doing? I've seen a lot of times in rehearsal, Craig is over there looking behind the drum shield at the kick drum foot, saying, okay, how can I sync up with this and make this just a really solid groove? Okay, the next part, after you got kind of those basics down, just some rules of thumb, okay? Number 1, don't overplay. Okay, you're going to hear a lot of overplaying, especially with young musicians. These guys have never overplayed in their life, but but you're going to hear that, and that's trying too much in the amount of space that you have. Really, I just want to push home the point that simplicity really speaks a long way, especially when it comes to drums and bass. And you will find these are great musicians. As you develop your craft, you will find ways to work in tasteful things that create more energy and really give the song and give you and your team a bit of character that might be separate from just playing it exactly like the recording. But less is more, right? Don't rush, okay? That is such a huge deal. When I was in college, my voice teacher always told me this. He said, Josh, amateurs rush, but professionals take their time. And I always thought about that because I wanted to be a professional, so just to pretend to be a professional, I would just tell myself, okay, take your time, and at least it'll look like you're a professional, right? So it's good to take our time and to settle in and to not rush. And how do we do that? And you go back to the basics. We're going to play with metronomes. We're going to play that little beat in our heads. On Sunday morning, most of our songs are played to a click track because we have the opportunity to have in-ear monitors. Now that means we're always playing to a metronome. The advantages to that is that we can really have freedom to express, and it's not all on our drummer to keep everybody on the beat because the metronome is really the standard, and then we can play around that, and that's really, really helpful. Here's another one. Practice makes permanent, so practice correctly and practice consistently. Now those are two big things. The more you work on your craft, guys, you know this, the better you're going to get at it, and the better you're going to be able to lead beyond your instrument. At Kingsland, we talk about all the time, leading beyond our instrument. We want these guys to be worship leaders and not just instrument players. When they have mastered their gift and their craft and their skill, then they can sing along, they can enjoy and do other things. Their brain can really activate other parts of their leadership instead of just focusing on the notes and making sure that they didn't make any mistakes. And so practice, practice, practice. Remember as a band that everybody is contributing and not just you on your individual instrument. Drums and bass are the foundation, and so the basics and keeping it simple, they accomplish a way to give everybody else a confidence to fill in those little gaps and spots that they need to while they're playing. Okay, let's talk about a little bit of the beginning of songs. So let's say if we wanted to start a song off, there's a couple different ways you can do it. And I would be as a coach like, hey, here's how we're going to start the service, guys. We're going to, I need a little bit of what we sometimes call a drone or a sizzle. And then I'm going to speak over that, and then we'll start the click track, or the drummer will click us off, and we'll go into the intro of the song. So here's what a little bit of a drone or a sizzle might happen on the tonic note, which is really the root note or the key of the song, the low note of the song. So give us a little drone on G, right?
All right.
Here we go. So imagine everybody kind of doing that. You saw Craig was playing almost like an eighth note, really light, with his fingers to sort of legato put those together. We had the cymbal swell. Sometimes Cedric will have some mallets. Thank you. Sometimes he'll have some mallets, and he'll swell in with that. And it just kind of adds this energy, and then you can speak over that as a worship leader, and it's not just like dead air, but you have some energy underneath you and a sound and a little bit of anticipation, like, hey, something's about to happen here. We'll talk about another way. Sometimes you just come out of the gate and you go. The click track starts, or you hear the clicks, and you just fire off and you start the song. That's another great way to start, especially if you need to get right into singing or getting people's attention. And then now we're talking about ending of songs, okay? Because it's a lot about how you begin, and it's also how you end, and sometimes those are the most memorable parts of a song. So there's a couple different ways that you can coach your band to end a song, especially with the bass and the drums. One would be you are getting to that final note, and you hit the final note, and there's typically going to be some kind of a trash can ending. Now all that means is that you are just, basically sounds like you're hitting on trash cans and you're playing notes that would fill the space, and you can either let that wash out, or you can do what's called a stinger, and everybody comes together and syncs up for that last beat. So here's a trash can ending, and we'll end it on a C chord, right? And then we're going to do it, and we're just going to fade out first. So here's the trash can ending. Nice little fade here. Now we'll do the same thing, but we're going to have a stinger here at the end. And watch as the drummer and the bass make eye contact to sync up when they're going to hit that final hit. Now sometimes a worship leader can lead that, you know, as we do with our hands or with our guitars. We bring down every hits together. But sometimes the drummer is in charge of those moments. So here's a trash can ending on a C with a stinger at the end. Awesome. So Cedric even led into that with a different fill on the snare drum. So that was awesome. Other thing we want to talk about now is creating energy. Now, creating energy can happen in so many different ways. We're going to talk about volume, Dynamics. Okay, volume. Let's start there for a second. You know, volume is pretty big conversation when it comes to this instrument right here, right? Some of the best drummers I know can play with an incredible amount of intensity, but at a low volume, and it takes a lot of skill to do that. Cedric is one of those guys. He can do that. Now we put him in a cage so that he can play as loud as he wants to. And, we enjoy that here, but it's important to have that kind of volume dynamic to know when to play loud and when to play soft. Cedric, just give us blow us away, okay? Give us super loud and just a crazy expression on something.
Cool.
Make it up. So there are moments where that can be really exciting, and it can be a really good feed to what's going on. But say you're in a room like we're in right now, which seats about 40 or 50 people. He can't play like that. He's got to play with a little bit more control. And so give us the same idea, what you would do, but do it in this space with a little bit less volume. So as you notice, the tender care that he took towards the way he hit the snare was a lot less. The way he was using the cymbal, he wasn't using it as a crash ride that filled up the whole sound, but he came back to more a bell, hitting it on the inner part of the bell. And everything about it was smaller, but there was still energy and intensity and passion. So that was really good. Dynamics, okay? So let's get the bass and the drums together. So we're going to be playing just a simple groove. We'll go back to the rock beat, okay? And I'm going to give Craig a little bit of freedom here, because Craig, he can play in all the cracks of music, okay? I mean, he loves to move around, and there are times I have to coach him as a worship pastor and a leader. I say, hey, Craig, can you give us a little less on that? Because he's just so gifted. He's got so many notes that he can give to the Lord that we want to just, save those for some great moments. So here's a rock groove, and then what we're going to do is pretend like we're on a verse and then transition to a chorus. Okay, so they'll do 2 times through the progression in a verse setting, and then 2 times on a chorus. And on the verse, we're going to have what I coach this all the time with our drummers, with a closed or medium closed hi-hat, which gives it just a little bit of a nicer, less intensity, and you'll hear this on the recording. And then on the chorus, you've got to grow and crescendo with the hi-hat as your foot comes up, right, on the pedal, and opens it up a little bit more to give it more space. And that's what's going to differentiate between the chorus and the verse and the chorus, and give it a little bit more energy. And then after that, we're going to go into the bridge, okay? Now, the bridge is super important. We need a different kind of energy for that third section of a song. What do? Well, a lot of times, you're going to transfer to the ride or the crash ride. And that's going to be something you'll find out. So let's do those 3 progressions. We'll do the verse, we'll do the chorus on a hi-hat, and then we'll do the bridge with a crash ride. And just see the difference between these things. And Craig, you pick whatever progression you want on the worship leader progressions, right? Just those 4 chords. Some version of 6, 1, 5, or 4. All right. Saw the 3 different parts of that song and the energy that was created because of that. Now, when we're into even one of those worship choruses, say from Hillsong or something along those lines, the crash ride, it's almost going to turn into more of what you would hear, and you would describe this to your drummer as a wash. Give us just a little bit of So you see how the energy of the cymbal fills the whole room. with that just washed energy. And so the way he accomplished that, he hit the cymbal with a different part of his stick. He turned more of it to the side, and it allowed the cymbal to really just create that space. Another idea to create energy in your song is to really talk about what a tom groove is. Now you hear this on a ton of recordings, so I just want Cedric, would you real quick just show us like kind of a tom groove that you would do in setting up like on a verse,
Yeah.
you know, and rock it through a song. Awesome. See, that's just a totally different way. You know, you can describe that in a number of ways to create energy. You can say a tom groove, or like kind of like a tribal beat, or something that just gives us that energy that's different than doing a kick and hi-hat and a snare sound. And there's a lot of music, especially now you're going to hear it, that is introducing this tom groove or has been using that even more and more throughout the song as it builds and progresses. So another way to create energy is using the different registers on the bass to play at certain parts of the song. Craig, tell us a little bit more about what you do in regards to that.
Yeah, so when you're playing, and it's depending on whatever the moment is, you may want to think about playing stuff up an octave or maybe even two, depending on what the mood of the song is at that time. If I'm playing way down here when it's something that is really delicate, and I'm playing something like this, that is totally going to bulldoze everything else that's going on there. And I'm going to get a lot of dirty looks, not only from the worship leader, from the drummer as well. But if I take that and I play that a little bit more delicately up an octave, so now I'm going to take that same progression, but instead of playing it 4 on the floor down low, I'm just going to play a diamonds up high. And here's how that's going to sound, and it's a lot softer. It's a lot gentler. Nice thing to be thinking about, especially when you are when you've got an entrance when you're coming in like in a verse, especially if you've been laying out for a while, that you don't want to just jump right in and just start powering through. You probably want to build things in a little bit so that it doesn't shock everyone around you and shock the congregation out of whatever moment they're in.
Yeah, that's good. So one of the things that will continue to help you on your journey as you grow is to know when to put in some of those extra tasteful licks or fills on the drums and the bass. And so what we want to do is just show you a 4 on the floor pattern, which is what we talked about earlier. And these guys are going to do a 4 chord progression pattern. And then we're going to give them a little bit of freedom to tastefully put in some licks and fills on their instrument, and just show you how doing it just subtly, not a whole lot, can make a big difference. So you can see there's a room to have a little bit of fun inside of those once you get the foundation. But even the first 4 measures of what they played, they stayed very basic. They stayed right with that pattern, and it just locked in the groove, which is so important. Okay, last thing I want to talk about is just how you prepare for a song individually. So I want to start with Craig. So Craig, when your worship pastor, provides you a song either on Playing Center or says, hey, check out this YouTube video or whatnot, what do you do as a bass player to prepare for the song?
The very first thing that I do is listen. Listen, listen, listen. That is probably the core to to learning any song. And I would say the first time that on the first pass that I listened through it, I listened to the bass, because that's my main focus. Is I'm listening for the bass. I'm listening for if there's any like a signature lick that's being played that I've got to make sure that I'm playing that, or like a particular riff that is like iconic to that song. You want to make sure that you've got that. Then I'm listening on further passes to other instruments, and I kind of go through and I listen for each other instrument. And so I'll listen through another time and I'll listen just to the drums, or maybe I'll just even go as fine as like kick, and I'll just listen to the kick and see what the drummer's doing, and okay, how do I need to line up with this? What am I getting into here? And then figuring out just how what I'm playing is going to be fitting in with everything else. And then after listening through a few times and doing that, then I'll take a look at a chart and go, okay, these are the exact chords and things like that. But I really think as a rhythm player, it's so important to be able to have the groove be your first focus. And you've really got to be able to lock in with that and have that be the first thing that is in your head before you even start looking at any sheet music or anything like that.
Cedric, how do you prepare for a song? What's your process?
Yeah, similar thing. You just got to listen very intently. Especially for me, it's all about the progression of the song, because we talked about dynamics and how you want to build the song over the course of how it's progressing. So you want to identify, this is a verse part, this is a chorus part, I need to be bigger here, or I need to transition from the verse into the chorus in some kind of way. And then, for bridge, am I building up from a chorus into that, or is it dropping out? How many times is the bridge going to build? What is the drummer doing in the recording to build the energy? And a lot of times I also listen to the vocals a lot. The vocals are very helpful in identifying, this is the verse part, this is the chorus part, or, oh, this person is going to do a vocal run right here, and that's how I know we're about to go into the chorus. Little tips like that help. It's kind of like setting up your neural pathways to already know, okay, this is going to happen because this happened. Even listening to the, bass is super critical. You need to listen to the kick patterns. And if the bass player is listening to the same recording, it's very important that you do your best to line up the kick with the drummer as well, because your bass player is going to be listening to that. When you link up on Sunday, there's only so much time you have to iron out patterns and stuff like that. And then just listening to whatever the drummer did on the recording. It's written that way for a reason. It's very important to try and abide by those grooves, because on a Sunday, the worship leader is going to be expecting, if they were expecting 4 on the floor and you play rock beat, it's going to throw everything off, So it's very important to just make sure that you're playing to the recording as accurately as possible. And as you get better over time, you can identify ways to embellish those things and write in your own parts and work with your team to make it a unique identity. But just getting the original down as close as possible is good.
Yeah. There's so many ways that the bass player and the drummer work together in harmony to create just a wonderful foundation for the band to build off. And really, it's our responsibility as worship leaders to assist, not to always dictate, but to assist them in communicating what the desire is for the overall sound of the band. But it starts right here with the bass and the drums. Thanks so much for joining us today. I hope that you have grabbed some things from these wonderful musicians here and learning what you can do to improve your craft and get better at working together with bass and drums and setting that foundation for your band. And we just pray that God will continue to use the gifts that He's given you to further His kingdom and to lead in His church and to encourage people to worship Jesus. Have a great day.